Good afternoon and welcome to our sixth and final panel series. Today's panel is phenomenal colleagues of ours that'll talk about admissions myth busting today and demystifying all those, as I like to say, wine club chatters and whatnot. For those of you that don't know, my name is Luis Portillo. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions at the University of Delaware. That is my day job. And my night job for MARCA is the VP of External Relations. And I will let my colleagues introduce themselves. And Matt, we'll start with you.
Hey y'all, I'm Matt Willcox. I'm the Regional Admissions Officer for the University of Georgia. I cover Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and West Virginia, and I'm coming to you from our offices on Capitol Hill, Delta Hall, and I'm the incoming VP for Finance for MARCA, which is going to be super fun. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aseh Nshom. I'm an Enrollment Services Manager for the University of Pittsburgh. I serve our DMV territory and looking forward to meeting you all in virtual and face-to-face in the near future. But I just want to thank you all for attending today's webinar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jua Howard. I'm a regional admissions representative for UC Berkeley. I cover Virginia, DC, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And then also for MARCA, I have the privilege of being the director of Virginia and DC. So look forward to the conversation and thank you all for joining us.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Zimmerman. I'm a regional admissions representative for Shenandoah University. So I cover Western and Central Pennsylvania, cover the state of West Virginia and portions of Maryland, work out of my home here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So glad to be with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. As you can see, a very wide array of types of schools that we have here and also types of knowledge. I know for a fact, between the five of us, there's well over 30 years of experience here at very different institutions. So we will go ahead and get started. In first and foremost, the biggest question that I get all the time, and I know you guys get it as well when you go through panels and visits, do you compare one student to another from either the same high school or another high school? My parent told me I've got to outpace my classmate or the student at XYZ high school down the street. What say y'all to that?
I'll start with something we should start with on every panel and every discussion in college admissions is the phrase, it varies or it depends. And you're going to hear that a lot from us, and we're going to hear a lot about context from us today. But when it varies or it depends, what we're saying is from school to school, from university to university, college to college, everybody does it a little bit differently. And so my suggestion is, if you do have questions, even on these myths that we're talking about, to reach out to the us's of the world and ask, say, Matt, what does it look like for two students at the same school applying to the University of Georgia versus at another school? What I can say for us, and I think my colleagues will certainly agree, we are never comparing two students at the same school as though there's only one slot for that school and you two are competing for it. If you ever do a virtual case study, that we do that, and it's not the way we do things in real life. And so while we're looking at everybody who applies in our pool sort of competitively with each other, you two students from the same school or the same homeroom or the same hall or whatever aren't fighting it out for the one spot from your school.
And I can expand upon that. I will say, by and large, admissions offices throughout the country are providing a holistic review. And which I mean by that is, the information that you share with that office should really highlight your potential and your performance as a student. And so there's numerous ways in which you can really highlight who you are as an individual and as a scholar. And so I really just urge students really kind of take the time to do their own fair share of research so that you can really know the type of campus and university that you're looking for.
Yeah, I'll say for us, same thing. I think wholeheartedly, I think the holistic review, I always try to stress to students, it's the full picture, as always, when we're looking at context. And I put it to you like this, especially being UC Berkeley, you're part of the University of California system as an example, where you've got 9 undergraduate campuses. Each of us are very distinct. And a lot of times students will think per se one is higher than others per se on the pecking order. We don't think of it that way. When we talk about admissions at the UC system, we tell you to check out all 9 of us. That's the way we see it, because we want you guys to have options. A student that comes to UC Berkeley, when we're looking at you holistically, we will see your story and who you are. Or you may be a wonderful fit for us. You may not be a great, or the next student may not be a great fit for us, but they'd be a wonderful fit for, let's say, UC Irvine, which is another great school, just to use our system as the example. So when we're looking holistically at you, again, we're looking at, when we always talk about fit, how are you really going to contribute to our respective campuses community? How do you fit into that? And by you telling your story, you let us know that clearly you've done a little research on our school and you understand, as Matt said, a little bit about that context, where you're coming from, your experiences, and how that matches with who we are as an institution. And that very much is a part of the conversation as well when we talk about kind of the context and this whole comparison thing, which we do not do. But again, contextually, what are you bringing to the table, and how are you going to fit within our community and contribute something during your time on our campus?
And I would just say, kind of in closing, the points, made so far, all tremendous, but, at least with us, I would say, looking at profile, maybe on paper, would be the least selective, but depending on the programs that we have at our institution, that may depend on, one student being admitted as opposed to another, just based on, some of our programs, we admit, above half the applicants that apply into them, whereas others, at Shenandoah, for instance, we may accept less than 10%. So that's, a lot of times that context really goes a long way into, telling the story. And then I know my colleague from the University of Pittsburgh, talked about the holistic review and the other supplemental materials that we may, find our way in. Those do a lot of the telling of the story as to, who we're going to ultimately review and ultimately, make those admission decisions upon. So that's, really important in this process as well.
The 4 of y'all bring up great points in context of the high school. Let's flip it on context of the college, right? How close should we pay attention to rankings? I and Matt, I see you laugh right away. Is it really true that XYZ school in the Northeast, in a colder state than where we are in the Mid-Atlantic, is a better school than, let's say, a school in like Kansas or Oklahoma, like a Hendrix College that's a lesser known school?
So Kevin, when you mentioned selectivity, I was just thinking that selectivity or rankings from some publication that nobody reads any other time of the year but to look at those rankings don't necessarily equate to a good student experience, specifically a good student experience. You were talking about fit. Fit is going to be more important for every individual student than any weird ranking system based on how much alumni give back. And like, rankings are evil, and they're not the best way to make a good informed college decision. Thinking about fit and holistic for both you and the school looking at you is a great way to do that. Now, if you want to look at specific programs or where they fit, or how scholars that maybe you want to work with, where they are, that's a great way to think about it. But just ranking lists, get out of here with
that. Anyone else want to jump in on that? Piggyback?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Matt. I think they're evil. I think they don't make sense within the space of, I think, best advising students of being able to do some. And as you guys are young, I always tell students, they're young, we know this, so self-reflection can be kind of, a hard thing, or kind of like, what is that? But I think but I also feel like we a lot of times don't give students enough credit. And a lot of the students I talk to have a good sense of kind of who they are. And a lot of times you just have to do the work. I think looking at the ranking system a lot of times can be a lazy way to do things. You got to really do the work to really reaching out and going to different, all these virtual programs we're offering, and or when we're back in the physical space, visiting schools, going to consortium visits, whatever you can do to learn about all of our different schools. That's the work you got to put in to understand what we're representing, what we present to you as a student, to see, are we going to be a good fit for you? Going back to my previous statement about the UC system, one of the things that I think kind of irritated me and kind of blew my mind when I first started working for UC Berkeley is that when we as a system would go to same college fairs, it was like a lot of people thought that, let's say, UC Santa Barbara or UC Riverside is an extension of UCLA or UC Berkeley, and they're not their own respective campus. And like, where they like as if they don't have their own value. That bothered me, and so for one of those things is like, no, you need to learn about all of us. I don't expect everyone to come to UC Berkeley. Give me a break. No, I need you to do your research and make sure that you're going to the best place for you. But you've got to do the research to get there. So the whole ranking system and all of that stuff, I think it just creates a very unrealistic and kind of anxiety producing kind of process, I think, for students and also their parents who will get into the mix, versus really taking your time to figure out what matters to you as a student and kind of work from there, work with your counselors and moving forward to trying to figure out what are those going to be those potential good matches for you.
Fun fact, while you were speaking, Jua, I did a quick search on US Newsweek University rankings criteria. And for those counselors that are on here that are looking to advise their students or even tell their parents, right? Because let's be for real, Jua, you nailed it. A lot of the time it's the parents driving the search based on rankings, right? And how do we demystify that? And one of them is class size takes up a portion of that. The other one is faculty salary. And the one most surprising one is how many freshmen sit in a freshman English class. So that really puts a disproportion when you look at context of the institution, right? When you look at the difference between a UGA and a Shenandoah that's much smaller, or even my alma mater in Radford University, right? But like those are things I think get lost within the rankings, and it's something that we need to address on a louder platform, I guess. And hopefully this is one of the ways we're doing it, right? We'll jump into to the next question that we have is, and Aseh, I'll throw this one to you. Is it better to get a B in an AP course or an A in a regular standardized course?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, as an admissions professional, I always encourage students that we always encourage students to take courses that are challenging. Of course, we would love to see APs and IBs and honors courses on your curriculum, but I think it's more important that you take classes in which you find interesting and you can also score well in. And so I will say there's numerous factors that play into a transcript, whether it's the rigor of the curriculum, whether there's certain trends. And so that kind of refers to what I was alluding to earlier when it comes to about sharing your story. There's really no right or wrong answers, and especially with test scores and transcripts, there really isn't a particular type of score or transcript that will automatically generate a specific type of admission decision. There's numerous factors playing into the decision, and so I really just encourage students to really kind of find what kind of drives them. And as an undergraduate, especially as a first-year student, you really are going to be able to kind of immerse yourself in so many different subject matters. And so the earlier you can kind of take on that challenge, I think it's the better. But ultimately, we just want you to find courses in which you can definitely challenge yourself, but also you find interesting in itself.
Kevin, I've known you since 2012, and in the time that I've known you, you've worked at very many different institutions. What say you in that aspect of working at such a wide array of institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I know with us, in particular Shenandoah, looking at students, who are looking to go into, some health profession programs and things like that, certainly with the sciences, we are looking for, more of those A/B grades. So it's certainly, trying to find that great mix and balance of, finding, the time and opportunity to challenge oneself, but still being able to, find that opportunity to excel. So I find that, students who are able to strike that balance between, putting together strong marks while, being able to push and challenge themselves, I find like that's kind of the great happy medium as far as, the course selection as they're, going through high school, thinking about, what, we're going to want to be looking for. And I would say that across, not just my current experience, but, the various institutions I've worked at over, the past, 12 and a half years.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I agree with both of you in that aspect. Take the classes that you're good at and excel in those and challenge yourself. Never ever would I tell a student who struggled with math their entire high school career that going into senior year, hey, let's take AP Calculus AB when you struggled in pre-calc, right? Let's be for real. Play the hand that you're dealt with. If you excel in the Englishes and the literatures and the histories, challenge yourself in those and do well in those, right? So of course we want A's and AP courses and IB courses and whatnot. let's keep up with curriculum, right? Because I know not all of us are working at a school that specifies in engineering, but we have all at one point worked at a school that specifies in engineering or has that factor, right? Really quickly, should a student take AP statistics in high school or calculus in high school if they're looking to apply for an engineering program?
I'll kick us off with this one. With our faculty, and we are one of those schools with a very strong engineering program, and still that's our most competitive program. So faculty are kind of stringent with what they like to see sometimes. Definitely that calculus we need to see. That calculus, and preferably for us, calculus BC. If preferable, if your school offers it, I expect to see it. I think we've talked about context a few different times amongst the panel today about what's available at your school and are you maximizing the curriculum? And that's really where the context comes into play. So me looking at a student who's interested in engineering is really depending on what does your school offer you and are you maximizing it? If BC is offered and you can take it, yeah, I expect to see that in comparison to statistics. That is going to fare much better within engineering specifically. Faculty want to see that. But it really, the bigger picture of that, to your question, I think, Luis, is more so having continuously challenging math and science courses throughout high school. That's going to be more per se impressive looking at the bigger picture of, do you have the aptitude to come to our College of Engineering? Because that's really what we're trying to get to. Can you come to our campus and really thrive in our engineering program? So just one class, that's just a piece of the puzzle. But that's my preference. However, for those students who go to schools that don't offer calculus BC, I don't expect to see it because it's not offered. So that's the context. I have students who go to schools that may be under-resourced. They don't have AP courses. They don't have, they may have IB. They may not have anything. They have AP courses. They may have 3. Then I'm going to expect that you're hopefully going to challenge yourself within what your curriculum offers. That may not be calculus BC, but if you're going to take what's the highest level at your school, then you're going the extra mile. And then a lot of those students may, take maybe a community college course somewhere else and take the initiative to go further. But I do think that's a part of the conversation with context, what's available to you, and are you maximizing it? If it's not BC, if you guys don't have AP curriculum, then no, I'm not expecting to see that. We're not going to disadvantage our students in that way. We look at where you're attending and kind of move in that way. So I do think that's really important to note.
I guess Jua just shut it down on that one. So,
oh, really, one quick thing. Let me say this, and hopefully you guys can agree with me here. As students, and this is again knowing what your aptitude, where it lies. If your strength is not in math and science, please do not apply to our College of Engineering. That's just real. I'm just being very honest. That's dealing with the self-reflection, talking to your counselors, your parents, getting a sense if your grades are not strong. Luis mentioned, hey, if that's not your strong suit, try to be as realistic as possible with that and know, hey, this is not for me. I may need to do something else and try to explore those other options in high school. That's best possible. But that's also very important because my heart is always broken when I talk to students who may not have been admitted to Berkeley, but you're not going to be admitted to our College of Engineering if you have D's and C's in these particular courses. That's just not realistic. So that's a part of the process as well. So that's another piece I'll throw out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Jua. Taking the word of your college counselor or even your IEC, if you're working with an independent education consultant, they're in this profession because they're wanting to help and guide you. Talking about college counselors and things like that brings up the question of public versus private, right? And I know I've had this discussion with many of you, at lunch or on the road before. But what do you say to parents and college counselors and students that are asking, because they go to a better school, high school, let's say a very well-funded school or something of that nature, does that automatically give them a plus in the admissions process versus a student who goes to an underserved school?
So I can lead off with this one a little bit. And we do have these conversations with parents and students who want to know how we compare high schools to each other and not necessarily the students within those. And I think I would just go back to Jua's point on that we're really, really trying to think about students individually in the context of where they're coming from, what's available to them, and then how they did given what was available to them. And so, at least in my experience, we're not privileging, we're not giving an advantage to a student because maybe they had more opportunities at a high school that's well-heeled or, you know, offered 40 different AP offerings. What we're doing is saying, well, they had those opportunities, what did they do with them? And on the flip side of that, you know, we work with some rural high schools where there might be an AP class. And if they took the AP class, they're maxing maybe the rigor for what they can do. And those two students look very different independent of the context. But when we understand where they're coming from, they both might look competitive to us. And so, Louise, I don't know if that answered your question specifically. We're not generally in the business of comparing high schools against each other. That isn't helpful to our process because we're trying to understand the student where they're coming from.
And just to go off that, I think that just really continues to go on to the point of, you know, Matt, what you kicked off with of saying, you know, it depends. And, you know, Jua, what you had talked about earlier, especially in the context of the engineering of, you know, just the context of, you know, the school in which a student is attending, because yes, someone may, you know, go to a private institution, but if they're not taking advantage of the opportunities that come with, you know, that education, then the student who may be going to the, you know, less resourced, you know, public institution, but they are utilizing, you know, what is available to them, you know, with the limited honors and or, you know, AP or IB courses that, you know, they have access to, you know, if they're, you know, pushing themselves with, you know, what they have available, then, you know, we're certainly going to look favorable upon, you know, them, you know, making use of, you know, what they have at their disposal.
Awesome. Another question we got through the survey that we sent out to counselors about myth busting was the whole aspect of the essay, right? That I have to write the perfect essay, that I have to make sure that I know what you want to read as the reader. What say y'all to that in the aspect of reading these applications and the essays, both supplemental and the common or coalition app essay?
I can start this off. I would just, very much encourage students to really understand the fact that the essay really is your one opportunity to share your voice and really kind of share who you are as a student. So if you are given that opportunity, don't overlook that opportunity or that platform. As an admissions office, we are very interested in knowing what kind of motivates you, what drives you, and ultimately ways in which you can contribute to the campus. And so, there's no right or wrong answers. I think, we want to hear your voice per se, not what you think we want to hear as an admissions professional. So, just be true to yourself. And as an office, we can definitely kind of sense on who the type of character, the type of student, and the type of individual you are through your writing. So definitely try to, be sincere and share who you are.
I'll just add something a little extra to Aseh's point. And just specifically, we talk about the differences of our different schools and all these various wonderful applications that you all have to choose from when you all are applying to our institutions. I'll speak specifically for the UC application, just because it is very different from other applications. For our essays, we have the personal insight questions, and they are short answer responses. You got 8. You have to answer 4 out of the 8. And I just always make this point simply because I don't want students to approach these short answer responses as they would a longer essay, and per se, maybe the Common App or the coalition, depending on how the structure is. You have more time to develop kind of your thoughts and, give a little bit more in these longer essays. Our essays, you've got around 350 words to work with. You don't have a lot. So you've got to get to the point. As I always tell students, don't beat around the bush. Tell me, well, first of all, answer the question, and then really answer the question. So a lot of times you really got to get to the heart of the matter quickly for our personal insight question response, just because you don't have a lot of time, again, to develop them. So you really have to kind of dig down really quickly. So just throwing it out there, just again, as a way, as you're looking at these various applications, again, being very detailed in reading through what are the instructions, word limitations, anything like that, so that, again, you really give yourself enough time to really craft your responses so that, to Aseh's point, you are really telling your story and putting your best foot forward and giving us a chance to get to know you.
Yeah, I would just add that students and counselors, for those of you that are advising students on this myth of the perfect essay, remind them there is no perfection, right? At 16, 17, 18 years old, they're not Pulitzer Prize winning authors, at least yet. The hope is they come to our institutions and develop into something of that nature so that we can get on the rankings list, right? Because that's one of the criteria for it. But Matt, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, look, I think we could do a whole hour on essays and what they are and what they aren't, and what we like and what we don't. But for most of us in a holistic review or a whole student review, the essay is one component of it. It can give us some insight into the student's character, into their voice, obviously into their writing ability. And all of those are wonderful. If I get, a sense of a mature, neat student from their essay, that's great. But I don't know, I heard on a panel like this, someone say that a great essay can cure the sick, not raise the dead, right? So if you don't have all those academic components, if everything else isn't going the right direction, a perfect essay wouldn't necessarily make the difference. So obviously work on it, think about it. We love reading your essays. It's probably the highlight of reading applications is getting to know a little bit about the student, but don't lose too much sleep over it.
And I would just, real quickly add, at least for us, we're not, common application school or coalition app school. We just have our own application with kind of our own, own open essay, where students are able to, write, to whatever they, choose to write about. And, at least with us, the big thing that I like, in addition to what, the rest of my colleagues have already added to this point, is just to be able to tell, a little bit more than, what we were able to already glean from the application itself. So, I mean, that's something that's I've always found to be really important is, well, if you're, kind of, retelling, information that I was already able to, gather from the application, what more am I getting? So that's something that I always like to, be able to get. Is that something that's going to, add on as opposed to just, repeat information I've already been able to decipher.
Very good point, Kevin. The pandemic hit us right across the face last year and took no remorse in coming back with a left hook after that right hook, right? My question to you all, as we have flipped the switch on higher education and how we're reviewing, and some schools were already test optional, some schools have moved test optional. What advice do you give to a student individually, in your own cases, to a student that is questioning, do I submit test scores? Is test optional really test optional? How do I go about advising a student that way when looking at this process that can be stressful within that entity, right?
Well, I'll kick us off just because I will say for us, I know one of the biggest changes that we had, like a lot of schools, was shifting our testing policies where the system itself did not just go test optional. We became, well, as we call it at Berkeley, test free, which is AKA test blind. So we don't see ACT and SAT scores at all. So that's a great question, Luis, because I think a lot of students, feel as if, especially again, in a highly selective process, that if they send the test scores, there's got to be some kind of extra point that they're going to get if they send it to us, even though I've already told you, I'm not going to see it. It's not. It literally, if you submit your applications to us in the UC application, I do not see your score at all. It's not even on your application. So it is not a part of the process. And I try to stress that as much as possible. That's honest. We will not see it. We are looking at everything else. AP, IB scores, those are supplemental. They are not mandatory. So I know we always we put this on our websites and we tell students this, but as counselors for you all, when we say that, I mean it. But again, I'm always welcome. I'll speak to any of us that you reach out and ask us. I actually appreciate that. And I've really appreciated the last year, Luis. I think that hopefully, I think for us on our side that we've been able to have these conversations with counselors to answer these questions because, they're trying to figure it out for all the various schools and their students to say, hey, what is this policy, Jua? I think this is what it is. Feel free to ask, because I think that has also helped us on our end be able to share that information with students, hopefully to reiterate it so that they get it. So that, again, we do not see it. But again, but that does not mean our process is any less selective. I will say that it is just as highly selective as it was prior to us getting the test score. So I always want to say that as well for students. it is still, it's a difficult process. But again, if you're a stellar student, you're a stellar student, and we're going to see that regardless. So you still have to, again, tell your story that we keep talking about. So that has not changed in the least.
And just to piggyback off that, I mean, I will say test scores are just one piece of the puzzle. So, in a perfect world, ultimately, I would just encourage students to do their research. I would say most offices and most universities will include profiles for their individual schools. So, it is a case-by-case basis, but if you feel that your test scores are kind of within that scoring range of our peers, I would definitely encourage you to share that information with our office, because that is a strong indicator. But at the same time, like I said, there's numerous ways to kind of share your story. So don't just focus and hone in on test scores.
When I'm talking to students and counselors right now, so it's early May, and there's a lot of movement right now on who's going to be test optional this year, who was test optional last year, more movement in that than I think any of us have seen in the past. And what I would say to students right now is, if you're not 100% sure that you're applying to only test optional schools, be thoughtful about taking the SAT or the ACT to have those scores so that you can apply to schools that require them. Because while we may see standardized testing going away in our lifetimes, while we may be going away from that overall, it hasn't happened yet. And so if you don't know for sure, if you want to apply to a school that does require one, you need to have those test scores ready to go.
And just, lastly to add on that, I think Jua brought it up, but just, asking the questions, reaching out to us, kind of finding out, what policies, we have across our different institutions. And, sometimes the language and the vernacular that we use can, be totally different. Talking about test free, we call ourselves test unnecessary. So, just making sure that know what, all these different, terms and, language and everything like that stands for, so that that if you're looking into our respective institutions, you know what you're getting yourself into as far as our, policies, optional or lack thereof.
And yeah, just to kind of bring everything back together for what my colleagues are saying, it goes back to the context aspect of it, right? Some institutions were test optional for admissions, but not technically test optional for merit aid. So reaching out and asking the question of your admissions person, or using that contact, there's a reason why we're employed, is to assist you in that answer, right? And the more questions you provide us, the stronger our employment, the hold on employment is stronger, right? So a couple more questions, and we'll cut this down. When looking at schools as a high school student, I'm told that if I report another student to XYZ school, it ups the chances of me getting in. Is it true? What do you guys think of that? We in the DMV area, there has been that dog eat dog kind of life, but what say y'all to that aspect of college admissions? Not all at once.
Please, can you reframe the question a little bit for us?
Yes. So the question was, parents or counselors that responded to the survey stated that students have asked if they should report other students' infractions in high school to colleges anonymously to gain a leg up.
So I handle conduct and misconduct and criminal review for any student who maybe has gotten into some trouble before they apply to my university. And one of the questions we get a lot is, do we go out looking at social media, or are we doing checks on students? And the answer is no, because we're going to hear from your community, because somebody down the street says, oh, my beautiful child didn't get into the university because this villain did. Anyway, people let us know if there's something in your past that maybe you didn't include on your application. So I'm going to flip that and not say, should you as a student be necessarily reporting another student to us for some infraction, but you as a student applying to each school and university should be very thoughtful and honest in answering any questions they have about things that may have come up. Have you been suspended? Have you gotten into some kind of trouble? And do that ahead of time so that it doesn't come up later in the process. Coming up later in the process can be very, very bad for a student. And so if you're asked, have you ever gotten suspended? Say yes if you have, and let us know. And we're happy to review that. As far as should you be, letting us know about other students. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I don't necessarily want to live in a world where that's the first concern of a student in getting into a school.
Yeah, Matt, that's a great point. I agree. I feel like that's a very slippery slope. And I'm like, and I've dealt with it. I dealt with it this past cycle. And for us, it's a conversation we have in our office about kind of what information is being presented, how is it being presented. I even had, I think, pictures sent with this particular email that I received. And the student was adamant about, hey, I need you to know this. And, definitely shared it with our leadership. We talked about it to kind of see what would next steps be. If we feel like it's something that's, a serious matter, then yeah, we may then, from our standpoint, reach out and or to definitely counselors to get a better sense of what's going on, and or possibly parents. I mean, we have certain steps that we do take, as Matt said, we all have our procedures kind of in place in our offices. We feel if it's something that may be a serious issue, but to automatically, per se, ding a student because someone else says something about them, I'm like, we're not going down that road. But again, it is a conversation that we will have in our office. I personally think, especially as a student, if you feel like something that is important and you are really doing it from a genuine place out of care for someone else, maybe that is a conversation you have with your counselor or someone else, some other identified individual, an adult that handles that kind of work, maybe at the school administrator, something that can have that conversation to then move forward. And then, of course, as counselors, you all definitely can reach out to us because, you all let us know what's going on. Definitely. That is what I expect. And something you're sharing with us, definitely, we will take it seriously. But that's a different conversation, of course. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that question came up because certain schools aren't allowed to report any infraction. So some of these counselors' parents took it upon themselves to ask that, which to me, not my monkey, not my circus. I worry about what I can control, not what I can't. And that includes other people's lives, right? And so I would never, call on another student just to get myself a leg up. That's unfortunately why we're living in the world we're living in. And Matt, you said it right. I don't want to live in that world, right? Just one more question, and this one's the big doozy, right? How many schools is too many schools? I heard that if I apply to 20 plus schools, that's 20 plus more opportunities, right? What say y'all to mass hoarding applications and even admits in that aspect? And we're in that time now where the ethical question of double dipping is playing into play, right? And how would you advise a student in that aspect?
I mean, overall, I would say having options is a great alternative. But ultimately, early on, throughout the admissions process, it's really about fit. And so I think there's other ways in which you can kind of discover whether or not a university should be on your radar. And ultimately, the earlier you kind of start that process, I think you'll be able to kind of identify those key schools, those key universities that may be the right fit for you. Ultimately, you're trying to find a place call home away from home. And I think there's a lot of universities that offer great features, different programs, and different student life. But ultimately, you have to kind of connect with us and other peers and other professionals to really kind of have that insight so that you can kind of navigate that admissions process.
Louise, to your question, I think a lot of us saw increased number of applications this year, and there weren't that many more high school students in America. So something's going on, right? Like, yeah, if you're a student, the more chances you take, the more opportunities you may be offered. That makes sense, but I don't know where that line is. And it's probably going to change from student to student. Usually, I think I hear around 10 is a ballpark that we're at where it's like, what are you doing more than you? If you can't get a solid list of 10 schools that you think you're a good fit for, that you're, some of them you feel really good about, your likelihood of being admitted, and you would be happy to go to any of these schools. 10 sounds, around that number sounds pretty good to me, but I guess do what's best for you. 100 is too many. I think we all agree on that. And what I did when I was a dumb high school student is too few. So somewhere between there, yeah.
I'll say, as always, I think one of my default responses to a lot of students regarding certain questions is, what did your counselor say? What did your advisor at your school tell you? Because for me, that's their role. That's their job. They're there to help you all, and talk to them. That is a resource that you need to tap into. They are there to help you think about, ask those important questions of, where do you want to go? Why do you want to go there? What's the location, the size, the academic programs, all these questions we always talk about, talk to them. Because I agree with Matt. I feel like if you have those conversations, and to Aseh's point, start early, then you can whittle that number down, I think, quickly. But you start early. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, you got to do the work. And I can say, and you guys probably, have noticed this, the last few years, it seems like a lot more schools are doing programs focused on their sophomores, where for a while it was just more juniors per se, but you have a lot more schools that are saying, counselors saying, hey, our sophomores are on it. We're trying to prepare them even earlier. And so it seems to be a trend that's going on where counselors are starting to prepare their students even more to have certain programming to help those students and their families earlier in the high school kind of, process. So the earlier that you can start, the better. And again, I feel like if you start early, do the work, really take your time, really figure it out, find the right questions to ask as you continue that process. When it's time to apply, I agree with Matt. I feel like you'll have a good solid 10 schools that actually make sense to you, not only on location and size, programs, the faculty, cost, all these various things that we talk about on our side. And I feel like, and I think that sounds like a doable number from my perspective, versus you guys just blindly applying just to say I got into some place and you have no intention of ever going. You want to be intentional with your time. That's very important, and definitely your finance, especially for those who may not qualify for fee waivers. This stuff costs. So you want to be very thoughtful about, are you willing to spend that money, and can that money be spent elsewhere that may be a better use? So just food for thought.
And I guess kind of put a bow on it. I think just the idea of fit and being able to get to the number of schools you would want or need to visit to, whether it's virtually or in person. I think by the time you put in the work that Jua, you made reference to, that number probably should be around that 10, give or take a couple. And I feel like with that certainly should afford yourself enough options to have hopefully multiple offers of acceptance to be able to choose from, and be able to make those decisions working through financial aid and everything else that's going to come into play in finding the place that's going to be best suited for the years to come.
Great answers, everyone. And I'm going to quote a colleague of all of ours that we all adore when we travel, Barbara Connor. She has this terminology of 5 first choice colleges, right? Like, and for counselors that are dealing with a student population that is a little bit more difficult, when creating these lists for these students, I think this part of the video is perfect to show them, the schools that you're applying to, like Jua said, you should be applying to them intentionally, and be excited to attend any of those schools, right? Because unfortunately, will you get a yes, or will you probably get a no at one of these schools? Most likely, right? Your chances of getting accepted are higher, like Matt said. But you also have a higher chance of maybe not being accepted too. So I always love Barbara's 5 first choice colleges aspect, and obviously our students are now sending out more applications. So maybe we need to change that to like first 8 to 10 colleges choices. So regardless, but gentlemen, I want to give you guys thanks and props for coming on and demystifying some myths that we've heard and that we continuously hear, whether through a virtual world or in person. Again, thank you from the MARCA Exec Board. Thank you for our counselors that are doing great work. And if any student stumbles upon this, as this being our last one, I do want to make sure and give y'all a round of applause in what y'all have been able to do during this pandemic. I think not enough people are telling you as a high school student that you're doing a great job, right? This whole virtual world is new to everyone, and you guys are literally kicking butt and taking names. To my school counselors that see this, thank y'all for all the work that y'all have done. To my admissions colleagues, kudos to y'all for making it through a pandemic year in recruitment, and I applaud y'all so much in that. And with that, I will say thank you, goodbye, have a wonderful week, and we hope to see you at our wrap-up series, which will happen on May 21st from 10 a.m. to 10:30. And then we're going to split you counselors up into a case study specific to the region. And I know our regional directors like Jua are working hard and diligent to getting a snapback panel ready for y'all and going through that process as well. Again, thank y'all from MARCA. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.